So, joining us now on the stage and our next speaker for today is Alexandra. Her speech entitled Feminist and Decolonial Infrastructure, Supporting What Sustains Us. Alexandra here is from the Digital Defenders Partnership. She describes herself as a cyber-feminist enthusiast of freeing and emancipating technologies. And she also coordinates a Gender Tech Institute. So let's have a really warm welcome and a great big round of applause for Alexandra.
Hola. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to spend some time with you and understand a bit how is it going for students working on that topic. That is really important for me. I must say that this is the first time I'm doing this conference in English. So I'm gonna bear with me first, and I'm gonna read my notes, but I'm gonna try to make it nice, okay? And I'm gonna kept some time aside so we can have also a discussion and a conversation, because I think it's important on the topic that I'm going to present. And yesterday, listening to Christoph Becker, I was like, oh, I think I'm one of those critical friends he's referring to. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about feminist infrastructure because our perspectives and the conditions of how we are accessing, using, and developing technologies, they are deeply influenced by the ways in which patriarchy and capitalism and colonialism are embedded in our daily lives and in the societies in which we live. So what I'm going to try to expose or make visible is how feminist infrastructure lies under us, no? Because the term infrastructure, it combines the word structure with infra. Infra means under. And there's another very vague definition of the term, that is the facilities that form the basis of any operation or system. That means that infrastructure can exist in various dimensions, like architecture, bridge and roads, energy management system, national sovereignty, but also social habits and practices, support and solidarity networks, or IT infrastructures. Here, when I'm talking about feminist infrastructure, I'm talking about all the resources that support and reinforce the development and advancement of feminist and transfeminist struggle. So what is feminism? Feminism is about struggles for achieving equal rights and opportunities, not only here, but everywhere in the world. And we are very far away from this situation, no? And it's also about dismantling patriarchy, which is a system that has been making women the most oppressed subject through history, but is also hurting men because it's enclosing us in very strict gender roles. No? So this is what I'm meaning when I'm talking about feminism and transfeminism, is because we do side with our trans sisters and LGBTQ people for their also struggles. No? So when I'm talking resource, I'm talking analog, I'm talking digital, I'm talking social techniques, technologies, and process, and there's some difference between those. So feminist infrastructure, what it enables is the systematization, the maintenance, and the circulation of good ideas and practices and care. For instance, sorority networks, sisterhood networks, no? They are an example of feminist infrastructure. They are maybe one of our earliest and more widespread feminist technology. We organized, this is not yet. Last year, we organized a Transact Feminist Convergence on Feminist Infrastructure in my community. And we had a call for notes about what is feminist infrastructure, which kind of projects are you involved, and we received 60 proposals, no, workshop, conference, performance. And the topics were very wide, no? We had proposal around self-defense, defense of the territory, no? Territorial defense, ecosystem and interspecies solidarity, spells and rituals, vegetable and orchard garden, restorative justice process, support and solidarity networks, how to create safer space, and techniques for life. And I took advantage of having so many people working on that project to ask them, what is your definition of feminist infrastructure? It's so vague, no? It's so wide, no? So most of them were saying, okay, it is supported by and for feminists, no? But it's also addressing many other things. So I'm going to read some of the answers. They were saying it's something that supports people to make their own decisions, giving them the choice they have in terms of their rights, bodily autonomy or digital advocacy. It should support people from marginalized and diverse communities and be very intersectional. Any infrastructure that generates as little violence as possible. Think about it. They consist of questioning power and systemic dynamics of domination together. And one that is like getting us more to focus on what we are going to be discussing. Your website works when it works. It doesn't have to work 24/7. That's an idea that needs to be abandoned. 24/7 is just needed for breathing. So that's where I'm going more, because I'm not going to talk about all the feminist infrastructure. I'm going to make a focus on a digital feminist infrastructure, the ones that are building technologies to inform, to communicate, to document, to connect, to relate, to explore identities, and to invent subversive and radical narratives and imaginaries about the other possible and desirable worlds that we are building already now. So we are talking here about the other technologies, those developed by and for civil society, with a focus on those that are created by feminists, anti-racist, women, dissident bodies, indigenous community, and racialized people. All of them are building everyday feminist infrastructure for safer and more diverse and more inclusive technologies where privacy, protection, and affirmative and enthusiastic consent are the norm rather than the exception. The good news is that there are many projects and collectives, and they are somehow like connected between them, like an archipelago, that is building like a feminist internet, And this feminist internet is like composed by spaces that are on a self-defense mode in the commercial centralized internet, but also autonomous infrastructure that is existing at the margins of the World Wide Web, where people are still maintaining their own servers, their own services and protocols. The bad news is that it's not possible to compare the size of this archipelago with the current commercial centralized internet, which business models relies largely on the monetization of surveillance, hate speech, and gender-based violence. That's basically the business model. So we want to explore some vocabularies in this conference to enable us to talk about these other possible technologies and outlining the links with feminist infrastructure. And then in the second part, we are going to be like showing you initiatives that exemplify what we understand by digital feminist infrastructure. So we always say that what is not named does not exist. You need words to name things and to make them visible. Cyberfeminists, feminist activists, trans feminists, or trans-feminist hackers, they keep reminding us that the social and the cultural characteristic of the people behind the development of technologies, as well as their motivation, matter a great deal for what kind of impact those technologies are going to have. When you invoke a technology in an attempt to solve a social or a political need, and not do so by harming other social groups, other species, this requires a very diverse and varied efforts and contributions. As it has been said in the last 2 days, like apolitical and neutral technologies, they don't exist. They are myths that allow maybe engineers and developers to sleep at night. Digital colonialism extracts the resource of the herd, subjugates entire body territories, extracts the data from our device, and affects our digital bodies, and further colonizes our mind about what are technologies and what are not, and who are the legitimate people and profiles to make and maintain them, and who are not. So when we are building technological sovereignty and feminist infrastructure, it begins with first clearing the mind of what technologies are and broadening the view of them. Second, remembering the diverse contribution of women, gender dissidents, indigenous culture, and other anonymous people in the development and maintenance of technologies. And three, understanding that there is a long tradition indeed of collectives and networks that have been developing the technologies they needed for social and political agency and transformation. So, women and feminists, they have always been there meeting those networks, underneath and on the sidelines. They have been sharing techniques for living and making appropriated technologies. They have been making slow technologies, ancestral technologies, minor technologies, and free technologies in the pursuit of the sovereignty and the autonomy of the communities that were developing those. We have been the bearers and the warrantors that knowledge of this diversity of techniques would be shared. Because as Margarita Padilla reminds us, the struggle for sovereignty is about communities. No one invents, builds, or programs alone, simply because the complexity of such a task is impossible. When we look closely at the landscape of technological sovereignty, appropriated technologies, liberatory techniques, and feminist infrastructure, we do find many women and LGBTQ people and indigenous people that are implementing and developing those technologies. So what marks the difference between a technique and a technology, and why is this important for feminist infrastructure? According to Biagini and Carnino, technique is both know-how and the tools. It's a set of informal processes and their instrumental sedimentation in the objects that are produced by craftsmen, artisans. Yeah. Technology is a set of macro-technical processes that are broader than the human being and the technology of a people. It is made possible by the alliance of science and technology. This means that technique can be non-technological, but technology is based on the absorption of techniques. And in the systematization that is induced by the production of technologies, the techniques for life, they can be ignored and they can be destroyed altogether. But those are the ones that are offering us other ways of thinking our relationship with the environment and the values we project in this relationship. I want to draw our attention to a projection, a possibility that was outlined by Murray Bookchin in 1965, when he mentioned what it might be like to move towards liberating technology. So here it's just like some snippets. It's a very long text. It's available on the internet. I invite you to read it. So he says, technology must be seen as the indispensable structure on which all living institutions of a dynamic social organism are based. Technologies should be at the service of life. In a liberated community, the combination of the industrial machine with the artisanal craftsman tool could reach a degree of perfection, of creative interdependence unparalleled in the history of mankind. The aim will no longer be quantity and uniformity, but quality and artistic value. It will no longer be important to sell at all costs, but to produce durable products. If technology is to serve life, it must be rooted in the community, conform to its needs, and remain on a regional scale. If several community groups were to share the factories and the resources of the area, solidarity would be promoted among them. A confederation would emerge. So this declaration, this vision of what would be a liberatory technology at the service of the community that needs them, what it reminds us is that it is situated knowledge, and it's speculative knowledge and experience where we can find the ways to get rid of the myth of the science and technological progress. The current technologies that are developed by big tech companies, they are defined above all by the move fast and break things. Doesn't matter what I break, who I break in the process. Very few participate in dreaming those technologies, in their conception, in the decision-making around how they should work, but all of us, we are exposed to the effects of their implementation. It leaves no room for collective speculative conception of the techniques and the technologies we really need and we really deserve. Modern science and new technologies, what they do is to push away, to absorb the techniques that are necessary for life and prevent us from finding the steps and the shortcuts and the paths to our appropriated technologies. So according to L.F. Lane, I'm going to give you with the image. So according to L.F. Lane, an appropriate technology describes a technology that is best suited to environmental, cultural, and economic situations, requires fewer resources, involves fewer costs, does not require high levels of maintenance, is generated with local skills, tools, and materials, and can be locally repaired, modified, and transformed. After all, what community does not need a technology to be efficient, understood, and adapted to its own context? No? That's a great question. So I put too many images of her story, but it's so you can be in the experience of seeing like the other internet and the other way of developing technology. So that is a memory base of a computer that was like literally like knit at hand by women in different industries in the 70s. That's another process of knitting in an ancestral technology. But I have like, I'm going to the slides that relate to my text now. So To keep going on with those vocabularies to speak of other possible technologies, I want to talk about the modest proposal to save the world by Yasanaya Elena Aguilar Gil, who warned us that for Avillala, which is Latin America, no, only technology will save us from climate disaster, no? And technology is basically collaborative work for support each other, no? That is like implemented by many people in Mexico. And she illustrates this technology in action with some examples like the digital activism in indigenous language, which is a project that is bringing together Wikipedians, app developers, and programmers to create content in native language. And she also makes reference to the community cellular technology project, for which the community do own and maintain and operate technically, no, the GSM network they need. And this project has been also like, they have a sister project that is called Rhizomatica, who is also creating mobile phone networks in local communities in Oaxaca. In Mexico, we have Darwin Franco Miguez that has researched and written a book that is called Technologies of Hope, in which he tells us about how some of the families of the almost 100,000 disappeared persons, missing persons, are learning to use all kinds of technologies from shovels, picks, tree roads to aerial and terrestrial drones and satellite maps to find them, to find those missing persons. And also in Mexico, there's like Nadia Cortez, Irene Soria, Silvia Soler, no, that have been doing a book about technologies of care, where they have been analyzing in different chapters how these technologies of care take form. No, it goes from our vital dependencies on incubators for premature newlyborns, the way that a woman is affirming herself in hacker communities that are male dominated, or the affective relationships that we are developing with breeding animals in the context of a family farm. So I find very interesting that all these examples, they come from Mexico, which is a country with a long history of communal space and communities in struggle, and we're at the same time facing a systemic wave of violence in which technologies are playing a role very important in surveillance, control, and repression by the narco government. And at the same time, those technologies also represent possibilities for liberating the autonomous and the sovereignty potential of those communities in struggle, no? And in that sense, if we cross that frontier, no, that artificial frontier that was created by man, no, we find also the technologies for liberation and building abolitionist future, where in the US, we have like people of color, queer, trans, and indigenous that are leading powerful anti-racist and depenalization movements, no? And these communities, they're also confronting a sophisticated surveillance machine and a data capitalism that is perpetuating all structures of oppression and structural racism inherited from slavery, no? And all this is generating strategies of resistance and deep reflections on how to imagine liberating technologies for their communities. In near Detroit now, in relation to the Allied Media Conference, we find the Consentful Tech Project and the Consentful Tech Curriculum, which explores how the values of affirmative consent could be applied into the design and the development of technologies. What it would like, no, to have the consent to use and inhabit technologies, if it would be free, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. So I'm going to detail, no? Like free. In technology, if an interface is designed to induce people to do something they would not normally do, the application is not consensual. Reversible. Anyone can change their mind about what they want to do at any time. In technology, you should have the right to limit access or completely remove your data at any time. Inform. Consensus application use clear and accessible language to inform user about the risks they present and the data they store. Enthusiastic. If someone is not enthusiastic or not really interested, it's not consent. If people give up their data because they have to do in order to access necessary service, it's not consent. And specific. Saying yes to one thing does not mean to have to say yes to others. And consented application only uses data that the user has given directly, not data acquired through other means such as scraping or purchasing, and uses it only the way the user has consented to. So if you take this framework and you think in all the technologies that you're using on a daily basis, which one would pass the test? I don't think that many. So it's in this mutual understanding and consent between the communities and their appropriate technologies that lies the key to a feminist infrastructure that can support the regeneration of ecosystem, because it would place at the center the value and the affection that people, machines, and ecosystem would offer to each other. So now that I have named and identified these other vocabularies, I'm going to present you like some areas and some projects. You're good? See, just checking if you're sleeping or you're fine. It's hot here. Maybe we can open this again. I don't know. Like, it's hot here. Okay, so yeah, let's go to some feminist infrastructure initiatives. So one of the first category maybe would be feminist online resource and her story. So, and they are maybe the most visible and well-known part of the feminist infrastructure. So very often the motivation behind those projects is to make visible content of interest to women and LGBTQ people in relation to their struggles and concerns. And other times also it's about making her story. It means to find, to document, and to make visible their contribution to various fields of action that have been undocumented or barely visible or have been directly silenced and erased from official and institutional narratives. It's important not to underline that many of those resources, they are produced and maintained on a voluntary basis, and they rarely have an economic model that sustains them in a stable way. So, and they also can take place in the commercial internet. You can have like a feminist online resource in a Google Doc or in a Facebook group. And of course, that makes them also like dependent of the terms and the governance of that platform. So some examples, yeah, there are so many, but would be Cyber Feminist Index or Musea Mami or Pussipedia, Wikifemia, the Feminist Peer License or La Creatura. So I will give you the slide and the links and you can investigate and see them. Another area of digital feminist infrastructure would be helplines. So helplines is a self-organized civil society response to a range of violence that are caused by the patriarchal, capitalist, and colonialist system. For instance, we have the helplines that are set up by women for women seeking information about their sexual and reproductive rights or how to access a safe abortion in many of the countries where this right is persecuted or criminalized. Another kind of helplines would be the ones that have been setting up now around the world to provide support to people that are facing gender-based violence online or violence that is enabled or facilitated by ICT. So one example would be FemBlock in Catalonia, which I'm part of, Navegando Libres in Ecuador, Maria Lab in Brazil, but bueno, there's maybe 20, 30 projects like this that are more or less trying to form a learning and knowledge community, exchanging practices and knowledge between them. And it's important to understand that what is happening is that basically feminists are creating infrastructure to systematize support and solidarity, where filling the gap that is left by the market and the platforms that are not taking care of this situation, and also by public institutions and care circuits. Another area of feminist infrastructure in the digital world would be feminist servers. They bring together process of research, experimentation, and technopolitical practice, and it's developed by cyberfeminists and transfeminists that are interested in creating a more autonomous communication infrastructure, meaning not relying on commercial platforms but to set up your own server and service. So you can have more secure network space and you can have access to mailing lists and blogs and wiki, content management systems, social networks, or any other service or software that is deemed like necessary for feminist struggles. I would say that, currently there's maybe a dozen feminist servers in operation, mainly in Latin America and Europe. And for instance, we have some projects like La Beca or Momentánea, They are proposing to share and host the knowledge and the service at the local level, in your house, for instance. And they try to challenge the production model of digital technologies and their energy consumption and the exploitation of people and resources that goes with it. Other examples are Clandestina and Veretas that are both located in Brazil, and one is for experimentation and learning to administrate servers, and the other one is for offering hosting of websites for feminist collectives from Latin America. We have also the project of Marix. Marix enables, is oriented to feminist collectives and also human rights defenders, And what they want to enable is that they can move to a more secure infrastructure for their own information, communication, documentation, and they can implement open source application in their own server through a graphical interface. So it lowers the need for technical knowledge and large investments. No? Another project is an archive server that focuses on building spaces to document the whole story of cyberfeminism, and also offers space of experimentation as its Negro Cemetery, where we can archive websites in a static form, so they can be still accessible. Again, for all these projects around feminist servers, sustainability and the ideal economic model is ongoing challenges, and the conditions of access and inclusion in these projects is also challenging because learning how to run a server is still quite out of reach for many feminists. And the final, the pre-final, another project of feminist server is Sister Server that run many services, among which a Mastodon instance and a PeerTube instance. So it enables to have your Mastodon account or to host videos and streaming in a PeerTube instance. And the last, pre-last would be like the development of software and bots and protocols. So of course, you have been discussing how to enter in the Internet Engineering Task Force. So there was a project by Juliana Guerra and Mallory Nodel that has been proposing to include the feminist internet principles inside the document which deals with human rights, so it would deal better with the impact of internet protocols on traditionally marginalized groups. The document is available on internet, you can read it and you can, Then there's a lot of activity around bot programming. So there's a lot of initiatives there, bots that work as helpline to support people that are victims of the distribution of intimate sexual content, or bots that create and spread feminist content in Facebook or Twitter, or even Oracle bots. And TogetherNet, for instance, is an open source software which invites groups of 10 or fewer participants to build community archives. And it's really designed on the ethics of data transparency and consent, with a framework that we were naming before, and aims to actively implement digital rights policy as the right to be forgotten. And another example would be AIR is a free software environment for statistical computing and graphics, and it had like a very poor palette of colors. So a group of Spanish speaking from Latin America has developed like a specific color library that is inspired by Latin America visual artists. And finally, we could also speak about the Read the Feminist Manual, which is a fanzine and add-on for Mozilla that replaced the pronouns she and he in technical manuals by they, which is a gender-neutral pronoun, which allows for technical manuals to be less discriminatory towards those who are supposed to develop and maintain technology. And the last project that I would invite you really to dig in is there's been a program for the last 2 years that has been piloted by the Digital Freedom Fund and by EDRI, the European Digital Rights Initiative, which have been looking at how can we decolonize the field of digital rights organizations in Europe. And it does involve participants from those organizations, but also social justice, anti-racist, climate justice, And they have been working for 2 years in seeing what was needed to be done and achieved to enable this decolonization of the field. And they just now released a document that is presenting the synthesis of that work and also the next steps they are proposing. The document is available online. They're collecting and gathering feedback. It's available in multiple languages. And if you're interested in that topic, I would invite you to have a look. And the next steps they're proposing is participatory and community-led research, initiatives for restoring, repairing, and they're proposing healing and also shifting of power and redistribution of funds. And finally, the creation of group support, the peer support groups, So I think it's an important initiative that has taken place in Europe in the last years, and gives some hope on the next steps on how to do it better. And to think our collective histories and memories with technology, we need to be able to tell and see them. We need to examine the collective movements of communities that are involved in creating their own liberatory techniques and technologies. And we really need to put some attention on rewriting the whole story of feminist infrastructure in all its diversity, so we can get some insights and inspiration about how we can do it in another way when we are creating those digital technologies and analog technologies. So that's it.
fantastic little speech there, Alexandra. Thank you. And it wasn't just the words. I think some of the artwork and some of the pictures were really lovely. Added a nice bit of flair to it and gave us something to look at while she spoke, which was brilliant. So, with that being said, do we have any questions? It's an awfully big subject and quite an interesting one too. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and some of your ideas in terms of what we'd like to ask. Is there anyone that would like to?
Can I underline something on the artwork? Can I underline something?
Yes, of course. Yeah, go through and give us a bit of detail.
Even the slides and presentation is a work of her story in the sense that it's hard to find images. So this is part of an ongoing project that we are doing to collect those pictures and images and archives about women and other bodies being involved in the creation and maintenance of technology. So now it's in a repo, in a feminist server, but I just say that it's not easy. Sometimes, you look at the first builder of a personal computer and you see there's a lot of image of the personal computer in the home, and there's very few images of the woman that did develop that personal computer, and then the image becomes very small and difficult to find. So yeah, just to say.
Brilliant. And I'll say the first question then in that case. When deciding what kind of images, what kind of imagery you want to include in these sort of presentations, what goes through your head? What are the initial kind of things that you look for, or the things that you specifically try and find when constructing a piece such as this or collecting images? Sorry, I get too comfortable with it.
When I try to have diversity of bodies and situations, and also for me it's really important to broaden the view of technologies. I think most of the people, they are if they think, what is the technology? I don't know. When I do this exercise and I ask to them, generally it's a poor answer, technologies are resumed to digital ones or the cellular or the mobile. And I'm always trying to make them think about technologies that might be analog, or that may be dealing with the body or with other situations or agriculture, or I don't know. So that's what I try to include also, diversity of situations, of bodies, and of technology.
Thank you. Well, it's always nice to be able to see in technology people that look like you doing things that you do. It's nice to be able to recognize that. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? I think we have a few here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the very interesting talk.
Yes.
Is it still on? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm wondering the alternatives in terms of technology networking services, network services that you are, I think, proposing here or are advocating for, is of course very different from what we go through every day, and also go through here, for example, with the setup we're using right now. So I'm wondering a little bit how you are approaching participation in, let's say, more non-optimal, non-alternative ways in our societies. How do you evaluate, value, make decisions on which technology to use and how to use it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's difficult to say, but my trajectory as a cyber feminist is that I stopped using private software 1,000 years ago, so I'm not able to use a Windows or a Mac computer, basically. And I don't use commercial media platforms, maybe only one account of Gmail to communicate with my mother and with institutions, and that's it. So all the rest is alternative, autonomous and stuff. But this is not caused only by my positioning as a cyber feminist and to demonstrate myself that I can live like that. And I know it's very privileged, and I know it's time consuming, and I know it puts me in situations where some things might be more complex. But it's also because I work as a person that provides a digital security and holistic security frame to human rights defenders. So I'm working always in assessing what are the most secure applications and tools, and this generally relies to make a shift to free software products, that can run in Windows or in Mac. That's not a problem, or in Android. So basically, my practice invites me to have to use those tools if I want to recommend them, and I want to train people to be able to go there. And it's also because, when you support social movements to migrate, to transfer to more secure technological platforms, generally also, you don't always have everything you want. Sometimes it's more secure, but it's not feminist. Sometimes it's a feminist approach, but it's not ecological sound. You know, you don't get everything you need in your transition, but at least you go to a better place in certain aspects. So it depends really of with who you are working, what are the risk situation, what are the needs for struggle, and what is the best infrastructure you can propose them, and how you help them to become part of that infrastructure, not just a user, but an inhabitant. No? And I know that's not always possible for everybody, but that's why I'm really focusing on working with communities. Does that make sense?
Right. So I think we have a question just over here. Is this from you, Pete, or is it from KT?
No, it's from me.
Okay.
Alex, thanks for your presentation. And you've been part of the decolonizing process that you showed at the end that was led by Edri and the Digital Freedom Fund, DFF. And for a long time, you've been a key contributor to feminist servers, anarchist servers, sort of that thinking. For people who are like doing their day-to-day work and getting involved in these terms like decolonizing, social justice, feminism, they're quite usually top level values, but you really practice them on the ground. So maybe are there some lessons you can draw from your experience that you want to share with the people here?
No. Bueno, lesson, I don't know, but sharing practices, I can. Yeah, I think that don't do it only in the theory. Go to the place where things are happening and being discussed. So, and there's a lot of places, like, I think that not enough, but I think everywhere around us, there are certain collectives that are enabling a political and citizen appropriation of technology and a critical, and that's where you should go. Doesn't mean forcibly it will be like a feminist hack lab, maybe not, you know, but I think that's a good space for starters if you want to have a more political appropriation of technologies. There are communities that are organizing events that are questioning the intersection between certain areas of work. Like it's not the same, to work with land defenders on developing their infrastructure that it is to set up a project like this in a community, in a rural area, that it's in a urban area. So if you don't know what to do in your free time or holidays, look at it, because there's a lot of events that are generally like this one, self-managed, no investment at all. We got 120 persons at that event for 8 days last year, and I know other things are happening. So try to find it, because from there it's like you enter and then you've got the lines that are gonna like bring you to your next step of the adventure. But it's important that you find your community to enter there, and that you don't remain only in the theory and the reading, and that you are also generous. Like sometimes you discover some stuff and you are really like harsh on yourself, and maybe harsh on the people around you that are still not yet, acquainted on those topics. But don't do that, because we are in a process of learning together, and that's not the way of moving forward. I don't know if that's useful.
Got any questions? Okay, one over here. I don't think it's going to reach all the way, Brian. Oh,
Hey, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering about the links you have with academics, because sorry, I didn't move on. It's up to you. Okay, so you're a practitioner, and so I was wondering what kind of relations you have with academia, and the difficulties you can face also to reach academia or academics, having difficulties to reach you, and how you make these links. Sorry, I'm asking this question because I found it really amazing, and I would love working as a scientist with some communities, and sometimes I feel like I don't have the good approach, or I don't know how to approach some people, and how to not offend also, and having this this trustful relationship takes so much time. So I was wondering.
Yeah, those are good questions too. So, long time ago, because I'm a very old person, I did a PhD. And I did a PhD about social movements, and I choose to make activist research. Like, so that's, you know, it's part of the tradition. There's ricerca, action research, like there's different methodology. There's activist research because I was an activist. So for me, like, you cannot study social movements from the far. You need to be part of the movement, because if not, you cannot understand the motivations. If you cannot understand the motivations, you cannot really make a research about that. I'm not saying that this applies to all the subject of studies, no, but I think for social movements and understanding social and political transformation, if you want to do a really good job, on my perspective, you need to be part of the stuff. So that was like problematic to do an activist research at that time in my stuff. I managed, I got my cum laude, perfect, and then I left academia because it was not the place for me for many reasons. But I still do research. Like every time I'm involved in a community or I'm part of the stuff, I always try to create knowledge that is useful. So this is about applying activist research principles. What is useful knowledge that is needed by this community to move forward? What are areas that are not enough visible and that needs to be better understand? You get to know that when you are part of the group, no? And then of course it's all based on creating mutual relationship of consentment, no? It's more difficult to do that when you are in academia, depending which academia, because there's a lot of extractivist process taking place, and because there's also been a lot of bad practices in the past of not returning the information and the knowledge to the communities it has been and not creating with them. So yeah, I have doing policy-oriented and academic research and, you know, many types, but what works for me is activist research. I don't know, it works, it's good, the answer, what? Ça répond?
Muy bien.
Partly, I guess, but if we could talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, for a long time, yeah, I feel like your answer say like you cannot we cannot work on sustainability science within within the current research frame that exists. That's what I understand from your answer.
I mean, I respect what is going on, but if you want my opinion about academia, I'm gonna have problems and I need to spend one day more here, so.
No problem.
So, further questions, or are we all questioned out? Oh, over there, it's back. Once again, I can't reach all the way. You have to meet me in the middle.
Last one is more but it's about the last part of your talk. Show the lies. Can you give us some examples of which lies you're extending this to the people you want?
So, the decolonialization program that has been led by DFF and EDRI and has invited digital rights organization to join, no, has been about thinking what decolonization would look like in our organization. The document is good and it lays out basically different dimensions that have been highlighted, but I would maybe discuss directly what we have been doing in the organization I'm part of at Digital Defenders. When I joined 4 years ago, it was mostly a white northern organization that was like providing support to human rights defenders in the large majority, okay? And most of the people were based in Europe. And then there was a team of fellows that were located in the large majority. And then now we are like 37 persons from 20 countries in 4 years. And what has been happening in this growth is that we have been working like actively in a regionalization, meaning to create a capacity in the regions that there were not enough capacity to do the kind of work we are doing, that is not only funding, but it's also providing holistic security accompaniment to organizations that are, or individuals that are facing digital attacks, which generally a digital attack is not only a digital attack, there's also like surveillance and maybe physical attack, and there are other things at stake, no? So we have created capacity in certain regions, other regions had a lot of capacity, so we have identified people that were doing a good work, but they were maybe precarious. and we have created teams. And those teams now we have shifted the power on decision making on the grants, for instance, assessing the grants, who is demanding. Generally at the regional level, there will be more understanding and knowledge of the context. So now there's much more like decision making taking place at that level, in the same way of taking decisions on among all the organizations that are proposed or are asking for a mid-term, long-term accompaniment. So that's one of the first processes, no? And I think shifting power on the decision-making and where the funds goes and how it is decided is part of the decolonization. But then there are other things that come into account. So this, we are working, having like uncomfortable conversations among us with internal training. Because yeah, decolonization is like feminism, it's or deconstructing yourself, it's not comfortable. So we are having those conversations. We are having those conversations among the different teams and the different individuals that make up right now our organization. And that would be for me an example of working towards decolonization in our organization. And then I think in the process, I've been showing different tools and technologies that are being developed by a decolonial perspective and anti-racist people, which is another side of things, not exemplifying. But now here I was talking about the program that was taking place in Europe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I was trying to get some examples, but we can talk about it later.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about overall, the overall process.
Well, the overall process was messy and bumpy because there's not that much examples of decolonization program in digital rights. So when you are like seeing how to do it, you are in a process of figuring out, and also you are always working with people that are very different contexts of privilege, the way they can access to those spaces and give time to be part of the working groups and be part of the different activities it's needed in a field that is pressured, like the field of civil society and human rights. We are pressured, we don't have time, we are all the time dealing with urgencies and stuff. So it's pretty complex. So there was like a lot of, let's try this, and then there was like, this is not working, shouting, like struggle. Okay, we reframe. So that's been very impressive, the capacity of EDRI and the FF to see where it was not working and taking account the feedback, like this deadline stops, this deadline needs to stop with the deadline, because the process of decolonization needs another timing and we have different capacities. So they took that in account. It also like had an issue that it started at the moment in the pandemic, and creating this kind of relationship to an online, just online was not easy, but then at one moment there was the possibility to meet for most of the partners, and that also is very important because it's difficult to have uncomfortable situation with people that you could not create like some kind of bounding or some kind of trust relationship. So yeah, so there's been different working groups around different topics, funding, public engagement, I don't remember now exactly all, and those working groups would set up their own rhythms and deliverables, and then at the end of the process, basically they have delivered recommendations about how to move forward, and this moving forward now is gonna, it's detailed in the text, but it's been working in those 4 areas of community-led investigation, repairing and shifting power, creating transnational solidarities, and creating peer support between peers. And it will take different forms and activities. So I think that everybody can also have a look at that and pick up, maybe things that might be interesting in their own context. Does that answer the question?
Any further questions? Great. I have a few questions, but yeah, you'll get sick of my voice.
You are very generous.
Thank you very much for the talk. I hope my question makes sense. But so it's about the constant technology you spoke about. When you spoke about that, like we have to accept something, there's nothing to accept something else and stuff. I thought about like the number of website and app where we have to like authorize and sign to everything. And I hope I'm not the only one to do that, but sometimes I authorize that even if I don't read everything. And I'm wondering if for you, the fact that showing everything, and that's even if we are a bit drowned in a huge amount of information that we have to accept. For example, it goes in the right direction of the consumption technology, or like, is it the responsibility of the user to read everything and to make sure you consent with everything, or is it more the responsibility of the website itself or the app to make sure that the user is aware of everything he accepts?
So even if you would like to read everything, you will not be able. I think you need 1 week to read the terms of service of any Amazon sheet or whatever. So I mean, even if you want to do it, you cannot do it because you don't have the time and the human capacity, and you don't have the capacity to understand what they're telling. So of course, it's not user for me responsibility. It's like the way that the industry is framing things, and the policy is not enforcing in the way they're treating us. Like it's a permanent and continuous tricking, and so no, I think that the responsibility lies on the social media platforms, on the industry, on the policy makers in enforcing other ways of doing things. Even if some stuff has changed at the European level, it's still far away of being satisfactory, because it's not only that you get the policy, then it's that the policy is enforced, and then who can have the privilege and the capacity to take the law and the legislation and say, okay, I have this right, please make it happen, you know? Like between the precariousness and the capacity, so many people cannot go to a legal structure, no? So there's a lot of things there. So for me, it's like, I don't know, I think that in the minor countries, no? There are nice alternatives. There are certain countries where we have a lot of nice projects that are developed and not based on this kind of surveillance capitalism, and we should give value to those initiatives. We should try to use them. Moreover, if we have privilege, no, and use those alternatives that are really framed with, you know, something in mind. I'm thinking, I don't know, of Hamasoft, the Tous les Chatons in France, and many other projects, no? And we need to, we have the possibility. In many countries, it's not possible to go and use those projects for many different reasons, social graph and surveillance, and because you need that. But we have the possibility, so let's give some value to those projects to make them stronger, because indeed, there are like a lot of digital services that are so much better than what we use. So, and in our context, we can really give some time to find them and start to use them. And I don't want, like, I don't give a fuck that Twitter is dying. Like, it should have died like 1,000 years ago. You are not happy about it, like, please move somewhere else. Like, come on. So for instance, that's my positioning when I say user responsibility, you know, but it's not user responsibility to be reading everything they're throwing at us, because it's done in bad faith and it's for tricking us.
So I think we've got a little bit more time. I think we've got time for 1, maybe 2 really quick questions. I'll come over here to the front first.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And my understanding is your background is in OffSec for people to make sure that they are safe with their devices. What kind of challenges do you face regarding security when you self-host servers, or do you do it yourself, or do you have expertise?
I am not a sysadmin, neither a developer, but I'm part of some feminist servers. So the feminist servers we are like talking about, they are not facing major security challenges, because generally we are remaining under the radar. That's something I didn't say, but there's a huge part of the feminist infrastructure that remains under the radar, and they do it for security reasons, because they don't want to call the attention of gender-based trolls, right-wing, whatever, and because we want to maintain our projects and services as safe space, you know? So in that sense, Madix, which is a commercial server, feminist server that is hosting a lot of websites and collective from human rights defenders, not the only one, no? Or Clandestina, they do have an expertise in protecting and security and mitigation against DDoS or defacement or other things that you need to take in account when you are hosting the website of a collective or a person, no? So I don't know if that answers to you. My understanding is more that I skim all the time the scene of digital security. That's why it's great to be part of the community of digital security that works with human rights defenders, because there are people that are more experts that do an assessment and a reviewing. And what I do is try to be connected to the current situation and trends and digital attacks, so we can tune the recommendations with the people we work with. And the same with feminist headlines, like understanding by the kind of gender-based violence that we provide support, we can detect also certain alerts or trends or specificities, and then we will create capacity and understanding or documentation so we can address that. Does that answer you?
Yes, somehow.
I think I'm leaving you all half satisfied with my answers. Like, man. I'm really sorry.
You're doing great. It's fine. Great. So, any other questions? Brilliant.
I may have a follow-up.
Oh, that's fine. I'll bring the mic over to you.
So,
Oh, we have plenty of time. Let me just grab your.
so when you mean under the radar, do you go? Oh yeah, like, when you say when you say under the radar, do you mean it has a VPN or just that it's not publicly indexed by?
No, it means that it will not make public that they exist, or they will like limit the spreading of their existence to trusted and affinity networks. And of course, depending on where people are using those services and they are located, they might use VPNs or they might use Tor or whatever, no? But it's more when I'm saying that there's a part of feminist interest. For instance, there are helplines or initiatives that are set up to provide support to people. They will not make it public because they cannot afford maybe to receive all the cases that they would get if they would go public, because it's a voluntary base, or because they might be criminalized because they're in an authoritarian regime, no? That might criminalize them. So that's some examples of remaining under the radar. Means that, yeah, it might be. That's why I'm saying that if you want to get yourself included in this kind of communities, you need to find the community nearby yourself and then tirar el hilo, to say that, like, yeah.
Great. So we're almost finished with the session. I suppose the last bit of closing question that I have for you is, you mentioned that you like the idea of distributed groups going for political action, and that's one of the things that you're quite enforced for. Well, SICT is a group, and it's inherently political because we focus on things like sustainability and ICT. As young researchers, we have a lot of interest in getting our research towards policy and making these changes to affect society on a wider level. Is there any advice that you can give to us to allow us to perhaps do that?
Well, it's going to be advice and it's like, oh my God, like,
Well, it doesn't have to be anything particular, but what have you found in your career that is, or maybe useful for people like us?
I think it's important to work in collectives. It's hard. It's hard, but it's important. So you need to nurture a culture, removing us from the individualist perspective of things and create collective. Create collective, yeah, it's hard. Like you need to become more tolerant. You need to be able to consensus things and take decisions based on consensus. There's a lot of things, but I think it's very important because that's where you really test the possibilities of what you are promoting. No, that's one thing. And the second thing, I would say, you have only one life, so be as radical as you can. Like if you are privileged, you put your privilege at the service of less privileged people. If it's BS, just call it it's BS. Don't work in BS work or BS research if you think it's not worth your time or it's not going to make the difference that you are expecting. And I know that this is like sometimes tough, but then you might have less professional opportunities or money will not come as you would expect. So that's where communities enter into play. So to access the lodging that you need and lower the cost of lodging, or access the food you need and lower the cost of food and many other things. And that's where also communities come into play. So try to like have the possibility to be as comfortably precarious as you can, so you can have some capacity to say this is BS and I'm not gonna do it. I don't know.
Great. Those are really wise words. Don't be afraid to call out bullshit. On that note, I think